In the early hours of Tuesday morning, barely 24 hours after his predecessor had finished up at Coachella, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney announced that his Liberal Party had won all 3 of Monday's byelections. Not only was this a great result in and of itself for Carney's Liberals, it also means that, thanks to an unprecedented string of defections in recent months, they now have an outright majority in the Canadian Parliament, their first since 2019. So in this video, we're going to take a look at how Carney pulled this off, and what lessons his success might hold for centrists elsewhere. Have you ever wondered how much money TLDR makes each year, or who's funding our journalism? Well, we think transparency is super important, so we answer both questions in our recent video. It's linked in the description. So, let's start with a quick recap of Carney's political career, because it's quite remarkable how much he's achieved in such a short time. Having previously been the governor of the Bank of Canada and then the Bank of England, Carney only properly entered politics in January 2025, when he announced that, despite not being an MP, he'd be running for leader of Canada's Liberal Party after Justin Trudeau's resignation. After a 2-month campaign, Carney triumphed in the leadership election, winning 87% of the vote, a majority in 343 ridings, and beating second-place Chrystia Freeland, formerly Trudeau's finance minister, by nearly 80 points. Having won the leadership election, and thus becoming Prime Minister, Carney promptly called a general election, which had to happen at some point before October anyway. Before Carney's arrival onto the scene, the Liberals looked almost certain to lose. After a decade in power, Trudeau had become ridiculously unpopular, with his net approval rating coming in at a record low of -52 in December 2024, and the polls had the Conservatives, led by Pierre Poilievre, up by something like 25 points. Astonishingly, however, Carney was able to close this gap, and the Liberals ended up winning the election with 44% of the vote to the Conservatives' 41%. Of course, this was in large part down to Trump, who had spent the previous few months threatening to annex Canada and turn it into the 51st state. This was a pretty terrible look for Poilievre, who's sort of MAGA adjacent, while also allowing Carney to present himself as the man defending Canada's national interests against the tyrant from the south. But it was also down to Carney himself, who was and is a genuinely popular politician, with his approval ratings reliably coming in higher than not only Poilievre, but other opposition leaders like Jagmeet Singh. Nonetheless, while this was a pretty great result for the Liberals, and represents the highest vote share for any party in a federal election since 1984, it wasn't enough for an outright majority, and Carney ended up 3 seats short, with 169 seats in the 343 seats chamber. However, in the past couple of months, the Liberal seat count has been steadily ticking up, largely thanks to a number of defections. The first defection happened in November, when Chris d'Entremont, a Conservative MP, left the Conservatives to join the Liberals. He was then followed by another Conservative MP in December, another one in February, a New Democratic MP in March, and finally one more Conservative MP last week. All in all, this means that 5 MPs have crossed the floor in essentially the first year of Carney's term, unprecedented in modern Canadian politics. This is obviously more than the 3 he required, but Carney didn't technically have a majority because 3 Liberal MPs left office between January and February. All 3 subsequent by-elections were scheduled for April 13th, i.e. Monday this week, and all 3 were won by the Liberals, with increased margins, giving Carney 174 seats in the 343-seat chamber. The first time in Canadian political history that a majority has been formed through a combination of special elections and defections to the governing party. This is great news for Carney. Not only does it mean that he's able to pass legislation without relying on support from the opposition, but also that he probably won't have to call a new election until his term ends in 2029. Although, to be honest, he'd probably win if he did. The most recent Abacus polling, for instance, puts the Liberals 6 points ahead of the Conservatives, and suggests that Carney is far more popular than any of his counterparts, with a net approval rating of +22, compared to -7 for Pierre Poilievre and -9 for the NDP's new leader, Avi Lewis. You get the idea. Carney is so popular in Canada that he's apparently been able to defect his way to a majority, which raises the question, how did this happen? How did Carney become so popular relative to other so-called centrists like Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer? And what lessons should other aspiring centrists learn from his success? Well, some of this is still down to Trump. While he's not as vocal about it as he used to be, Trump still occasionally signals an interest in annexing Canada. During the Greenland fiasco earlier this year, for instance, Trump posted this AI-manipulated image showing Canada as part of the US on his Truth Social account. And in April, the Daily Mail reported that Trump only wound down his talk of annexation because he realized that the king, whom Trump apparently considers a personal friend, is Canada's head of state too. Even if he's less interested in annexation, Trump still represents somewhat of a menace to Canada, regularly threatening new tariffs or demanding compensation for bridges, which has continued to be both good for Carney and bad for Poilievre, politically speaking at least. On this note, Carney has also been helped by the fact that Poilievre, who's both unpopular and now considered a somewhat stale entity in Canadian politics, is still his opposite number and has shown no interest in going anywhere. Nonetheless, it would be unfair to chalk all of Carney's success down to circumstance, and we can see at least 3 things that he's done right which might interest other centrists. First, despite in many ways being an archetypal globalist, Carney is less squeamish about explicit acts of patriotism than other centrists/liberals, and you'll often see him waving the Canadian flag or doing super Canadian things like playing ice hockey. Second, he's tacked to the right on immigration, ending federal funding for asylum hotels and passing a Strong Borders Act to tighten up Canada's immigration system. This has apparently worked. Immigration into Canada cratered in the second half of last year, so much that Canada saw an annual net decline in residents for the first time since the Confederation in 1867. This has neutralized immigration as a political issue and gone down well with more right-wing voters. Third, and finally, he's remade the Liberals into a big tent party, willing to accommodate a diversity of opinions and politics, which is something that other liberal parties, like the Democrats in the US, sometimes struggle with. Now, this could backfire, and it's worth noting that Carney got some flack from the left of his party for the most recent defection, Marilyn Gladu, who was previously considered to be on the right of the Conservative Party. Nonetheless, it's still probably true that broad tent politics is a better bet, electorally speaking, than the ideologically motivated gatekeeping that you sometimes see from other liberals. Now, with stories like these filling the headlines, it's easy to be swept up in huge geopolitical and national security issues, and you might find yourself neglecting your own personal security. Your email is often overlooked when it comes to security, as you might think a couple of spam emails can't possibly be that harmful. But did you ever think about why your inbox is suddenly full of emails you don't want? Well, that's because those big tech companies that are responsible for your emails aren't built to protect your inbox. They're built to sell your data. Thankfully, Proton Mail has your back. That's because Proton Mail offers one of a few genuine tools that protect users' personal information from being monetized or misused by those tech giants. They encrypt your emails, prevent surveillance from bad actors, and give you back control over your own communications. Proton has even made it easy for you to switch over from your old cluttered email with a tool that will make this possible to achieve in just a few clicks. Or you can just start fresh with a new email account and a clean mailbox from the beginning. But that's not all. They also offer a unique generational reset for you and your family. In today's society, even those born with complete anonymity can only stay private for so long. Children are now funneled into major tech ecosystems through school tools and apps that require specific accounts. And as soon as a child opens up a basic email account, their basic privacy is being compromised, and big tech will instantly start to build an advertising profile without them even knowing. Thankfully, Proton Mail's Born Private campaign has an answer to that exact problem, as it offers you an opportunity to easily reserve an account for your child. You have the potential to protect their digital identity before profiling and tracking starts. So if you want to take back your own privacy or protect the future privacy of your family, start using Proton Mail for free using our link at proton.me/bp/TLDR, and you'll be one step closer to a fully protected online experience, free from data exploitation.